Hello, friends. Welcome to the Bincast, where small talk comes to die. Today, I've got a really wonderful friend from who I met in the midst of. Luke, I'm going to ask you how you discovered me. Really on
So,
context.
so I think I found you through the For You page on TikTok. I'm not too sure if I remember, but I think I just saw you come up and I was like, he's a pretty cool guy. So I just went over to your page and I was like, I'm just gonna give him a follow, so see what he does next.
That's awesome. We connected on Instagram as well too, and we did a bit of chatting back and forth and got more acquainted. I'm going to ask you some awkward questions along the way. You said I'm a cool guy, which is a very kind compliment. Thank you. Let me ask you to describe for me what cool looks like. What goes into the consideration of cool?
So, I mean, cool can be interpreted in many different ways, but I think that
Sure.
cool is someone who, you can relate with, you can understand and understands you in the same way. I
Yeah.
think, someone who's cool, they're, yeah, like I said, they understand you. You can relate to them. You know what I mean?
hmm Yeah, absolutely. I like that, but there's even more questions that are posed. How old are you, Luke?
So I'm 15.
15. And we have clearly like over 3 decades. No, I just
Yeah, yeah, something like that.
so I would probably argue that I'm not even in your age category, and yet use the words relate and understand. What were the parts that you related to and you felt understood when you were watching my content?
So I think that I mean you're an Uber driver, so I think
Right.
you meet many different people on a day-to-day
Oh,
basis. You
yeah.
you meet people from all types of countries,
Yep.
and I'm an international person. I've lived in many different countries, so I think that your mindset is cultural.
Mhm.
It's you have a broad mindset on how
Yeah.
different people how they grow up, where they come from. And, for
Yeah.
me, I've got to do that on a day-to-day basis whenever I meet someone new because I am moving a lot, and
That's amazing. I don't think I knew that you've been to different countries as well too. So you're saying the fact that you have experienced different cultures, different countries, different ways of thinking really made you accessible to having a broad reach of perspectives.
definitely, yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, we're gonna get into that. This is all really juicy, juicy, juicy stuff. But look, for my audience who's watching, tell us a little bit about you. We obviously you're 15 years old now. Where you currently are living, what you're committed to in life right now, what really matters to you. Just a little bit that gives us um, the picture that is Luke today.
Yeah, so I'm Luke. I was originally born in England, but then when I was a baby, I moved to Saudi Arabia,
Okay.
where we lived there in Riyadh for a few years, and then we moved back to England, and
Yeah.
that's where I spent the majority of my life. And then only just a few years ago, when I was around 12, we moved to
hmm
Stockholm, Sweden, and
Okay.
that's where we've been living ever since. Yeah. Currently, yeah, I'm 15, so I'm dedicating most of my time to education in my school so I can graduate with, yeah.
Cool. And you're currently in grade 10ish, I'm guessing?
I don't know the comparison, but I'm in my final year of first, like the first part of school. So then I go
Okay.
on for two more years to do something called the International Baccalaureate, and then I
Oh,
go to
okay.
university.
That sounds so official. Here we just have like grade 10.
Yeah, yeah,
International Baccalaureate. Man, that word even to spell. I'm an English major and I struggle just trying.
yeah.
That's awesome. Are you an only child, Luke?
Actually, I'm one of seven, so
7. That's
so
amazing. Me by one.
yeah. But I'm the middle child in the exact middle, so it's
Okay,
quite fun.
that is
But yeah, no,
amazing.
I've got three younger. The youngest is 3, and the oldest is 29. Could it be now? But
Wow,
yeah,
that's a
but the
yeah.
oldest two, they're in university somewhere, I think, or they're studying. Or, I mean, I don't know. We don't keep in contact with them much because they're adults and they've moved on. But yeah,
Yeah, for sure. So that's like an age span there between, of 26 years. You beat me on so many accounts. So I'm the oldest of six kids in my family. I don't know if you knew that. And the age span between me and my youngest sister is 23 years. So, man,
Yeah.
you're like one of the few that I've met that expands on my experience that way. That's brilliant.
But where you're from, is it more common to have more kids then, or?
Great question. Well, here's the thing. My dad, I think, if I remember correctly, he had 16 siblings. I know, that's a lot, right?
Yeah,
And my mom only had one brother.
right.
So there's a huge age span. But my cousins, let me see. On my mom's side, my uncle and his wife had three kids. I only met two of them while we were in Africa, and then the third was born, and so I never really got to know him until these last few years when we were able to reconnect. But yeah, so it's I think the gamut there. I don't know anymore what that looks like. The funny thing in my experience, Luke, when I moved to Canada, it was pre-internet age. And so the world was a lot more distant and separated then, right? But now, with the advent of technology and everyone really having access, or I should say, most people having access to online resources, it seems the world is a lot smaller where you can have the influence of many other parts of the world in your hemisphere. And so it seems like certain things have sort of leveled off because there's imbibing and emulating of different perspectives and cultures in one's place. So, for example, it's just a weird thing for me to think about this dichotomy that even in Africa, for example, where there may be a possibility in most places that it's easier to access a phone than it is easier to access clean water. That for me just still blows my mind. That accessibility that made itself so prevalent, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah, it's
I
crazy.
honestly don't know. I know. So people ask me, what's Africa like? And I all I can say is I can tell you what it was like once upon a time, but that was then, and things I'm sure have changed in such significant ways, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think Africa is portrayed in a very different way than it actually is, I think. Because I mean,
Hmm.
I don't really know much about, what goes on in Africa. I mean, all you see though is like you get commercials on the TV about children needing water and things. But I mean, I don't think you'd see the urban or industrialized areas and, as much as you would the
Yeah.
worse off, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I totally know what you mean. And along those lines too, I remember like, for example, my country, Ethiopia, once upon a time, it was featured on the news primarily because of the drought that was going on there. So that image still has very much stuck to the Western mind when they think of Ethiopia, for example, and they're like, "Oh man, this is what it looks like here, right?" And actually, it's moved on from them. From there, it has its own significant struggles now in a different realm with war and corruption and a whole variety of things there too. So yeah, it's kind of transitioned even then. So the
Mm,
world keeps on changing, and it's a challenge to keep up with those changes, it seems.
yeah.
Um,
Mm.
it seems like your travels have primarily kept you in that corner of the world, but with Middle East and the UK and Europe. I would love to hear from you, from your perspective, because you've moved quite a bit, it sounds like. Do you enjoy traveling to different places, or do you have that sense internally where you're like, I really want to kind of lock in and settle in for the long haul here instead of always being on the move and moving around?
Well, I definitely believe that, I mean, I love traveling. I mean, I love going from one country to another because I like getting those networks, those connections with people who can, possibly come back in the future and we can, reconnect. And, those
Absolutely.
connections and those networkings, I believe, are very important for me. And also to get more experiences, to understand different people's perspectives on the world and what they've gone
Mm.
through and things like that, because that makes people better people. You know what I mean?
So you love the diversity.
I definitely love the diversity. Yeah, I mean, I'm in an international school where there's people
Yeah.
from over 50 different countries and
Yeah.
with many different stories. So my closest friend group consists of like 5 different countries. So
Yeah. Um, if you were to keep on having the opportunity to move around, would you take it? Like if your
uh,
family were to continue that trend?
I think for the next 4 years, because they're my last years of schooling, I think it'd be better for me to stay here where I am. And then afterwards in university, I'm definitely gonna move somewhere. I think right now I'm settling on maybe America.
Yeah, okay. And what goes into the deliberation for considering where you want to go to university? Why not?
Um, well, I mean, for me, for what I want to do for university, I think it just depends on the course and, which standard the university is and things like
Sure,
that.
gotcha. Do you have an idea of what that looks like as far as what your studies are going to be, or is that still a process of discovery for you?
Well, right now in my education, I don't really know what I want to do in the future.
Yeah.
I'm bordering between either going into business, or either business, either medicine, or physics. Those are my three main areas of interest, and they're quite different. So it's.
Kidding. Physics is my least favorite of sciences.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Are you
yeah.
drawn to it because it just makes sense in your mind, or because of the challenge that it is?
I think it's a bit of both actually, because I mean, for me, it's just the satisfaction of when you get something right, and it's like, oh, it clicks, and it's like everything makes sense now. But also, it's the lifelong learning of that subject and area of interest, because physics is, always making new breakthroughs and discoveries, and it's things like that that just keeps you learning. Whereas if you're a businessman or something else, yeah, you learn it, you deal with it. It's like it's not nothing, I mean, but physics is very interesting in my opinion.
Okay. It's funny as I hear you describing why you love it and the lifelong learning aspect of it and how you continue to make these new discoveries. It's almost to a T why I enjoy working with people because they're so unpredictable.
Yeah,
Continue to
yeah.
bring surprises. Yeah, that is amazing. All right, so when it comes to these different places, see, like my experience, Luke, has been one where how do I say this? I've moved around so often that I've grown to dislike moving around. And for me, one of the struggles when I was younger and we're moving as constantly as we did was that I'd make friends in a place. And when I make friends, I lock in deep. I go deep. And then we'd move. And so it would mean change all over again. And I don't like change. And so it's moving to a new place and starting all over again. And so when I think of my growing up, I have like memories of all these different places. And so when I saw my friends, Luke, who had like all their memories in one place, all like they were in the same house, in the same neighborhood, same, school. And I think how nice it is to have everything in one place, but it seems we always,
Mm, yeah.
for that, we don't
But
have
I
that.
mean, because I'm in an international school, it's people, they go there and they stay there for only like 2 years or so. So it's very often that I make friends there and they just leave. So, but I mean, it is good to get those connections, I think.
Sure, sure. Um, Tell me about some significant things you've experienced in your evolution as a person because of that exposure to change in your life, that exposure to different cultural backgrounds, how it stretched you, things that you picked up along the way that really helped you.
I think part of it is understanding, where people are from, maybe their religions, and learning how to respect them, and try not to offend them, because obviously I think in the past I've done things that maybe subconsciously I've maybe said something wrong or things like that, and
Hmm.
being exposed to these different people, you learn, they've been through this, they've been through that, this is their religion, this is their culture, you should respect this and you should not say that, things like that.
Hmm. Gotcha. Um, how long on average would it take for you to calibrate socially in these new contexts that you're in?
I think I settled into places quite quickly. I mean, in Sweden, I think it must have been 5 months or so before I felt as if I was part of this area.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay.
Whereas when I was
Yeah,
younger in Saudi Arabia, I mean, I think I was too young to really understand what was going on in the first place. So
I see. Do you still have a lot of memories from when you were in Saudi Arabia?
I can vividly remember some things, but I don't remember it all. Yeah.
Gotcha. Now, if you were to be asked to give some distinctives of each of those places you've been to, from Sweden to England to Saudi Arabia, what are some distinctive aspects of their culture you'd say this is definitely what distinguishes England, for example, apart from the other two? And what would you say about that?
So I think Sweden and Saudi Arabia in particular are the complete opposites in terms of pretty much everything. I mean, I think Sweden has one of the most liberal governments in the whole world, whereas Saudi Arabia, it's more um, like kept in. It's more like, everything is kept within the country.
Yeah,
Only recently have women been allowed to drive in Saudi Arabia, which is,
right.
and there's still a lot of diversity in that country, and it will change hopefully in the future. Whereas
Yeah.
Sweden has been like one of the first countries to legalize gay marriage. It's been, you know, it's amazing with its free healthcare. Yeah, it's just, and then England, it's just in the middle. It's just, average. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. And the fascinating thing about all that is all these diverse changes are within a small geographic area in this world. Like all like
Yeah.
it. That's amazing. Okay. Would you say there is any cons for a government, a society being super liberal as Sweden is, or no?
Definitely. I mean, because there are some like crimes that if you commit, you don't get as near enough of time that I think you should.
Mm,
For example, if there is someone who has raped a child or something, they will only get around a year or 2 years in prison. So
wow.
I mean, that needs some work. But
Yeah.
the Swedish prisons and Scandinavian prisons in general,
Yeah.
they have much more of a different view. So in
Mhm.
Sweden, Denmark, Norway, they all believe in reform instead of America, where it's keep them in, yeah. So in Sweden, they if they take someone in, they'll
Mhm.
focus on getting them back out into society. They'll make sure they have a nice room, TVs, all the education they need to get back in the world. They'll give them jobs. They'll make
Mhm.
sure they communicate with the inmates with them, and yeah.
And that totally does not happen in a place like Saudi Arabia.
No, 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 definitely not. I don't know specifically the justice system there, but I know
Mhm.
definitely it's a bit harsher.
This is fascinating. So, yeah, I'm just intrigued even more here. From your perspective, Luke, just give me a contrast between the pros and cons of both extremes, and yeah, what you would propose by way of suggestion, just from your observation, your understanding, if you could fine tune the system to make it a little sweeter.
So I personally believe that the reform system is amazing. Um,
Mm,
but yeah, in Saudi Arabia, it's obviously that there's going to be less crime, I think, because people understand that if I do this, I'll get so and so years in prison, and I don't want that. So there's less crime, definitely in Saudi Arabia. But
mm,
in Sweden, there is a little bit more crime because they don't understand that this is bad because they'll just get a few years only in prison, and they're like, okay, I can take that. It's worth the crime. So that's
mhm,
definitely not a good thing. But
mhm,
like I said, Sweden is more liberal in the way that people are more comfortable in talking about their issues. And Saudi
mhm.
Arabia, maybe if there was a gay child, they would not like to come out to their parents or anyone around them because they feel they would be discriminated against for that.
I can see that. Yeah, it's an interesting challenge where so many places in the world that have some beautiful things that are also mixed with some challenges, and it's really it's rare to find that place that has that mix of both elements, right? Yeah, I never thought about that. Of the three places, which do you find you resonate with most by way of, my heart really is here?
I think definitely Sweden, where I am now. I think that's been the place where I feel, you know, this country is the country I'd like to be staying in when I'm 90. I want to move back here or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that just because of its progressive attitude and nature to social
Yeah,
community.
yeah, definitely, definitely.
Interesting. Okay. Um, you were mentioning it's cold there today.
Oh God, it's so cold. Yeah.
Okay, just because I'm also in a cold hemisphere, let's do some describing. How cold is it there?
I think currently it's -5 Celsius, um,
Okay,
but there is no snow yet. There was a bit of snow yesterday, but it did not stick. But I mean, in Sweden, usually it can get to -30 Celsius
okay,
in the coldest of cold, and snow can be meters deep.
okay, okay. And the extreme um, cold, how does that get? How cold does that get for you guys?
Yeah, like I said, I think around, I think record temperatures might probably -35 degrees Celsius
Oh goodness, okay.
In Stockholm.
Yeah.
But I
Okay.
mean, because Sweden's a huge country, so I think towards the north it might be -50 degrees Celsius or something.
When you say Sweden is a huge country, I thought it was just a smaller one with all the rest, but
Well,
I see.
I mean, in comparison to Canada, it's probably small, but but I
Sure.
mean,
Yes.
compared to Europe, it's one of the largest countries.
And Stockholm, like, is right there on the Baltic Sea as well, too.
Yeah.
How nice is it being by the water like that?
Oh, it's beautiful. In the summer, also in the summer, it can get to, nice temperatures like 35 degrees Celsius. I think and then it's nice to go maybe in a boat around the archipelago. Just, the islands around there are super nice just to
Okay.
go for a day trip and, bring a picnic and things like that.
Yeah, really cool. Um, do you like, do the Swedish people have an accent
You mean when they speak English or?
when they? Oh, okay. So I was presuming that they spoke English, but you're saying they also speak other languages.
Yes. I mean, Swedish's main language is Swedish, but Sweden is like I think it's the second best country for speaking English in Europe, I think, or probably in the world for a country that doesn't even have English as its first language, because in Sweden English is taught from I think it's seven. They're taught
Mhm.
English in class, and all the media is in English. Everything's in English. TV shows are in English, so they get exposed
So
to the
for the most part,
language.
they use English, okay, but they also have their official language, which is the Swedish language. That was my ignorance on display there. You have to learn the Swedish language as well.
I mean, out of respect, I do, but I it's definitely not needed. No.
Oh, okay, okay. But it's one of those things you're doing just to fit into the culture a little bit better.
Yeah, but I mean, so the reason I'm here is because my dad found because my dad's divorced with my mother, so my
Okay,
dad married a Swedish woman, so that's why I
okay.
came here. So half
Uh,
of my family is Swedish
yeah,
because so he had one child with my stepmom and then she already had two kids. So I've got
gotcha,
two step sisters that are Swedish and yeah.
gotcha. So the youngest, the 3-year-old, is your newest addition there. Gotcha.
Yeah.
That totally makes sense. Are you naturally inclined to languages? Like, do you love learning new languages, or is it just out of necessity where you're like, I'm going to do this to try and be a part of this culture?
I mean, I love languages. I mean, because I've been exposed to so many countries, I think it's important for me to learn those languages. I mean, my mother she's from Germany, and
Okay.
she's fully German, so I've learned that language. I study French in school. I study English, Swedish, and yeah.
And when you're in Saudi Arabia, did you have to learn Arabic or no?
I mean, I don't think I could speak then anyway, but I think in Arabic countries, English isn't a predominant language there. So in order to fit in, I think that English is not needed, and you need to be able to speak Arabic. So
Okay. I would say my strength lies in English, and so I stick to English passionately because I really love the English language.
yeah,
It's just a tool that I use. So with my diverse access to words and phrases and different ways of putting them together to put ideas into people's minds, I love the ability to do that. But at the end of the day, it's just a tool that I use to say, how well can I understand what you're thinking in your mind? What do I have to say to be able to extract in a helpful way and clarify it and avoid ambiguity and so on like that. So I love the English language for that, which means that when it comes to the opportunity of learning different languages, I don't take them just for the fun of it. So if I were to move to Sweden, for example, I would feel like I'm starting from square one all over again. Square one, where I was learning not only the language, but also the culture as best as I could to say, here's how I can communicate more effectively now. So I don't learn new languages just for the fun of it.
Yeah. Well, what
I,
languages can you speak then?
so I can speak a bit of my native language from Ethiopia, which is called Amharic.
Mm.
So I can speak a little bit of that, but when I speak with those who speak it quite well, which is almost everyone else, they can definitely tell that I'm fumbling my way through it. um, I have studied Hebrew and Greek in my grad studies, and I really enjoyed. Well, I'm not sure. I would say I enjoyed it because I was trying to understand some of the original manuscripts, and so that's why that was interesting. The Greek was definitely easier to learn than the Hebrew. So the Hebrew is one of the Semitic languages, of which my language Amharic is also as well, as is Arabic. Now I've looked at the Arabic language and tried to study it as well because I was working with Syrians for a few years who were immigrating here to Canada, and they were Muslim Syrians. So they were super gracious and they brought me to their homes. But I try to understand their language, which has a beautiful script, right? It's
Mm.
cursive. I can't make heads or tails of it though.
Yeah,
It's
definitely. Yeah.
so those are the ones that I've attempted to try and understand. French, of course, we learned French as a course here, in our schools when we were growing up, but I never really had any desire to dig into it.
Yeah. But so in Canada, because French is French its first language or second language?
Great question. Actually, French is one of the official languages, but it's the lesser of the two. So English is the predominantly spoken one. So let me just show you on my map here. If you can see, I'll bring the map a little bit closer here. So let's see here. Here's the world. Here's Canada up here. So Quebec is this province right over here, just this one province. This is the main language spoken in Quebec here. But all the way across the country here, it's English spoken. And of
Hmm.
course, they will recognize the French language. But in French, the French language plays king to English. English
Yeah.
definitely is playing second fiddle. The rest of the country, French is added on as officially as a second language. They'll have instructions in both English and French, but predominantly people will be looking at the English because that's what they navigate in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And from what I hear, here's an interesting dynamic too. And it's so there is in some sense in Quebec, that one province that has French as their official language, they are very proud of their culture. So it's a really big deal for them that French is highlighted. And from what I hear from many who have been there, you're almost looked down on if you can't speak French because they really are concerned about safeguarding their culture, the French heritage. And so that's a big deal for them. Not in all places, but in most places, I would say. And
Yeah.
then there's a difference that I can't tell by listening between the French accent that is Canadian French and the French accent from France. And those two, from what I hear, do not play well together at all. So
Yeah.
they can listen to each other and say, yeah, you've got that kind. And so we kind of, yeah, avoid you. It was a fascinating thing for me. I can't hear, but it's apparently quite evident.
Mm.
When you look at the Swedish culture that you're currently in, and you're seeing a lot of that progressive elements, you're mentioning some of the challenges. What other challenges do you see the community life facing or not because of their progressive nature that leads the world in that way?
Um, I think Sweden. is one of those countries that is a bit more progressive and um, yeah, but I don't think that there's any issues with that because I think every country has their own method of governance, and I think there are pros and cons in every way. So
Okay. And when it comes to the politics there, like there's been some countries that have there seems to be a growing disillusionment in the realm of politics because it seems, from my perspective, the people aren't feeling well represented, and there's a lot more that's at play that brings more sense of, hey, is this really in our favor from the people's stance? So America is one of those places, and they're still going through the midst of. You probably have been hearing on your end of the world what's going on there, right? Canada is the same thing too. I think of countries like Africa that um, a huge consistent struggle there again would be corruption at some very high and deep levels, not only politically but also judicially. Is there that sense as well in Sweden or not at all?
I think I think there is a bit of that in every country, but
Sure.
in Sweden it's a bit diluted. I think because
Mm,
there's a government, but it's a democracy. There are like 10 parties, or whatever, and they all respect each other, and it's all fine. Like in that sense.
mhm,
And I think the Swedish population, of course, each individual has their own way that they lean in politics, but at the end of the day, they all respect that this is a democracy, and that whoever is elected, whoever is in in the government, they all respect that.
okay, cool. Um, when you look at when you look at people in general, humanity, would you say you're optimistic or pessimistic?
I think in reality, I'm
Hmm.
pessimistic, but I think it's also elements of me. I'm quite optimistic. So it just depends on the situation. I think in broad overview of things, I'm quite optimistic. You know, I see a future, I see my plans, and whereas in short term things, I might be quite pessimistic. So, you know, if I have a test next week or something, you know, I might be a bit pessimistic
Mm,
and things like that. But in the long term, I think I'm quite optimistic.
okay. As you were talking there and sharing some of your hopes, your forecast, let me just share with you something that I didn't think about calibrating for when I was at that season. So me and my peers back when we were young, um, the sky was the limit. We had some big goals and dreams, Luke. It was just like we can't wait to get to a point where we are accomplishing and taking over the world, you know. And the way that we made our plans, Luke, was we just had everything in such a tight progression, and it was always successive plans that were successful. Successive meaning like this is going to happen. We're going to go to university, then we're going to get our master's, doctorate, or whatever, and then we're going to like become, you know, leaders in our field. All these things were going to progress in such a way that we were going to make our destination. Looking back, I would say for most of us, we've had to account for some significant setbacks in our plans. And I think when I look back, it was primarily because we forgot to plan along the way. What happens if things don't go according to how we're planning? How are we going to build flex in our plan? How are we going to build margins so that we can change the plan if need be? And so we're not locked into this progression here. Because what I was struggling with personally was when things didn't work out the way I planned with an original forecast, I grew with a sense of defeat and failure, where I was like, oh, well, now I'm feeling less than. I've made these projections and they're not coming to pass. And so I feel definitely less than, you know. And so, if anything, if I were to look back and see what I would do in any different way, and that's, I guess, what I'm proposing for your consideration, don't forget to plan for that shift, that life changes along the way. And when it does, to make that allowance and not feel like you're failing. And then the second part I think that I would hold really dear is not to account for, like, if I don't make it like the way I was hoping, It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm a failure, but it means more so that I'm still like my inherent worth is still intact because it never was dependent on my accomplishments. That was a huge discovery for me along the way, right? Because I linked those two so well, saying, hey, my accomplishments means that I'm worthwhile. But if I don't accomplish, I'm not worthwhile, kind of thing, right? But those two aren't necessarily like intrinsically inspiring. So those are some of the big things that I've learned along my way. And I'd love for you not to walk in that same pathway by way of discovery. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just interested though. What were your hopes and dreams that you were talking about?
Great question. Okay, so when I would say for the most part, I don't even think I knew, which is a surprising answer, because I was so set on pleasing those people around me that I esteemed really highly. And top of that was to be my parents, for sure. So wanting to please mom and dad and accomplish something so that their sacrifice from coming to a developed country was worthwhile because they worked super hard. I watched them working hard all their life so that we could have opportunities, right? So the expectation stereotypically for most immigrant kids is that you're going to come, you're going to have a great career after you've worked really hard and accomplished much academically. So I was not a smart student by nature. I had to work really hard. People would come and say, "You look really smart." I'd be like, "How do I tell you that I'm actually quite average?" So for the longest time, I don't think I knew. So I was following other people's expectations, right? So that was reflected in my academic career. I'd start off in accounting, thinking that was one way to get my parents off my back. Finished that at the end of that degree, and came to realize this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. That was the first time I made a decision, I feel, for myself, where I was like, I'm not going through with this because this is not reflective of what I want to do. Continue to try to find out what that was, whether it was medicine, and medicine wasn't it. I tried that route. It turned out to be not the right corridor that I should be walking down, even though I would say the world, and when I say the world, it was like my whole community, the city that I lived in. I was very well known. Like everyone was already calling me Dr. Ben because that's what they call me Ben back then. And so when I said no, I'm not going to do this, it was just again facing that opportunity to disappoint people, and that was hard. That was really hard. But finally, where I was supposed to be going, and eventually I went into the ministry to be a pastor. And I accomplished that. I did really well, I think. But then I stepped down from there because, yeah, my convictions were not aligned. But nonetheless, all that to say, those are some of the things I did along the way to eventually find where I'm presently at. And when I say when I found where I'm presently at, is me almost come to terms and saying, this is what really I find reflective of importance to me. And that is engaging with the world. You need people like yourself, Luke, having this opportunity to experience what it looks like to not only interact with the world, but also to learn what communicating well looks like, the very basis of this podcast, right? This for me is what really makes me tick and what I want to impart to the world by way of influence, by way of legacy, to say there is a way that we can optimistically connect with others in a way that the investment is continuing to give rich payback.
And do you think that you'll be doing this from how much longer? In the
You mean
term
like this?
in the form of, I mean, I think from what I'm getting from you, this is going to be
Yeah.
something that you're doing lifelong in any form. But I mean,
I,
what do you think your like next steps are in terms of occupation, maybe?
Great question. So for the time being, I'm what I call an Uberologist. I've self-appointed myself as an Uberologist because I enjoyed that job, and it's really just an excuse for me to meet people and interact. But I would be looking for opportunities, continuing where I get to meet people and communicate. Because when I communicate with people, Luke, something I've noticed is they really resonate with the way I see them, the way I draw them out, the way I learn about them, and the back and forth, just like you and I are doing. A podcast seems like a fantastic opportunity to continue doing that. And I would love to continue doing that because one, it gives me that access to people where I continue being able to talk with them, learn about them, but also modeling for others. And that's the important part for me is how can I take what I enjoy on an ongoing basis and present that as a model for others to consider emulating. That would be something I want to continue to invest in long term. I want to inspire people, Luke, to have that hope that even though they're in the midst of people, they don't have to feel alone or isolated. That there is ways that they can develop social skills that enables them to connect with others in tangible, meaningful ways. That gives them hope. That inspires that sense of, hey, I matter and I've got something to contribute in the midst of community. Great questions.
Thank you.
Let me ask you, what is in your 15 years of existence now, I'm really enjoying a lot of what I'm hearing from you. There's a sense of like you have good reasoning abilities and you've got a lot of experience, it seems, where you're putting together a worldview that is really appropriate and diverse. What would you say are some of the biggest lessons you've learned that you find have impacted your development?
So I think when I was 7, my parents got divorced, and I think
Mhm.
that was a major period of time in my life where I felt more alone, maybe, and things like that. But I think it's the lesson of independence that I learned that I am going to be independent for a majority of my life,
Mhm.
but I think it's important. I mean, maybe 7 was a bit too young for that, but I think just the knowledge of being alone and learning your own lessons and being more independent, I think that's where I've thrived the most.
Okay. Um, and independence is a fantastic thing. Now, how do you find the balance between independence and dependence on the community? So you're not a one-man show.
I think mm, there is a balance, and it is quite clear. I think that when you're independent is when you work on yourself. Is when you think
Ah,
about what you're going to do in the future, like or things that you're
yeah.
working on, stuff like that. Whereas the dependence comes when you're in your social aspect, when you're with friends, with family, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Gotcha. Really good. Um, how, okay, I'm trying to put words to this next question here. The recovery, if that's the right word, from from your parents separating, how long did that take you and how did that evolve?
I think it was possibly, I think it could have been 2 years before I fully felt like I was fine again because whether there are many positives and negatives that come with that. I mean, obviously the happiness of family is one thing, but I think that some negatives being the change and things like that. But 2 Christmases, 2 birthdays, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Where does your mom currently live?
Germany.
Germany. So your dad and your family are in Sweden and then she's in Germany. How often do you get to see your mom?
Well, currently it's quite hard, but I think
Right.
before on a normal basis it would have been 4 times a year or something.
Okay. Gotcha. And um, how, like, did you get the choice of who to stay or live with?
I did, and it was a very hard choice to make. But
I'm
yeah,
sure. I'm sure. That's not an easy one. Do you ever think about your future that way in terms of, I wonder if I'm gonna stay with my future partner or if this is just an okay part of finding one's place in life? Like, how do you think in terms of your future forecast that way? Or do you even think about that?
I don't think I've thought about that, no.
Okay. I'm often intrigued by those who've lived in homes where the parents have split up. what kind of expectations they have for their future relationships. If it's the kind that says, hey, here's something to learn so it doesn't happen again, or here's what is one of the possible scenarios that could happen in my future. I'm always intrigued by that, but I totally get that. Luke, what would you say is super important for you in life right now? What are you locked into right now by way of conviction, of purpose, and saying, here's what I'm keeping in front of me by way of priority?
Definitely, I think it's education, but not only academic, but more things I'm interested in, things that I'm willing to do in my free time that are not things that are chores almost, things that I
Yes.
do out of my own will, things like that.
And what are those extracurricular involvements that you indulge in?
So I'm currently very interested in science. I've
Okay.
I've I've published reports that have been published by Harvard. I've won international science competitions. I've got a certificate right there for an international science competition that I won a few months ago. So
Yeah.
things like that are things I'm quite interested in. Yeah.
Would you say you're a protege?
No, I don't think so. No, I don't think that's the right word to use. No.
Are you being humble?
No, I think 2 years ago, I think my grades were absolutely terrible. I did not have any motivation to do anything. But yeah.
What happened? What changed?
Um, I think something just clicked. I think I was just like, you know, might as well do something, and then it just happened.
And that was when you became a teenager.
Yes,
So you've got your academic commitments, which you're being responsible with saying, I'm going to focus on this and get this job done. But then outside of that, you have these other things you're interested in, one of which is sciences, which can be considered academic by most, but you're saying, actually, this is fun for me.
definitely, yeah.
And you go out of your way to study as much as you can and write and contribute into this community.
Yeah.
And this science involvement, is it primarily in the physics department or a variety of chemistry and biology as well?
Predominantly, it is in physics, but I think that as a whole, they will complement each other in the way that they're all linked slightly. So if you
Yeah.
learn one, then you learn the other, then you learn the other. I've got a
Yeah.
general knowledge in all three of the main sciences, and I think anyone who is in the academia of those sciences understands each one.
What fuels your enthusiasm for your scientific study? Is there something that I mean, there's of course things that you want to discover and continue to grow in your understanding. But what was like the genesis of it that has continued to like push you through all this saying, I got to read more, I got to understand, study more, and what has made it fun for you?
Well, I think 2 years ago, I had one teacher specifically who was my science teacher, and individually they managed. Well, before I wasn't interested in science at all, but after that specific teacher, it was something clicked, and I was like, science is for me, and I went through and I read more and I read more, and I was staying back after school studying for this, and I was things like that just made me want to learn more, and it's just the physics in particular is a subject that it's fascinating because most of it is theoretical. So it's anything is possible in the realms of physics. So it's
Ah,
yeah.
so it's almost like you're making up your way to try and understand things, even while you try to, like, would you say in its theoretical base that physicists are really trying to aim to get to the law of something while they're trying to figure out the theoretical aspects of it? Is that something fair to say?
Yeah, definitely.
So it almost sounds, see, like in chemistry and in biology, as I understand, there's definitely laws that are encoded. For example, there's a law of gravity. Something's going to happen when I drop something, the law of gravity, right? Or other expressions. And then there are theories. Would you say physics is almost like the creative part of science in that there is so much still uncharted, but that has yet to be codified into law because you're still trying to understand the implications of it? Is that a good way to say it, or would
Yeah,
you
but
say something
but
different?
see, The way I see it is mathematics is the building blocks of all three sciences. So I think that biology relies on chemistry, which relies on physics, which relies on maths. So I think that
Uh,
physics is if physics isn't right, then the other sciences aren't either. So I think that
mhm.
so I think that the laws of physics, they are set in stone. However, it's just the progression of what we don't know yet, which is very much theoretical and which is experimented by many different people. So
Wow. Okay. So there is, you're saying bio, which relies on chemistry. I can see that, which relies itself on physics, which doesn't have a lot of laws, which relies on math. Now, math, um, this blows my mind. So I thought 1 + 1 always equals 2. I think it still does, right? That's like, that makes sense.
I think so,
But
yeah.
but the thing is, I've heard that in the upper levels of university in the math realm, there is theoretical math.
There is,
And so
yeah.
I don't understand what that's all about. But all that to say, even though the physics has a lot to be determined, the things that rely on physics already have things that are codified into law, while physics is still trying to figure it out. And those ones, man, that's a mind blowing, man. That's mind blowing. um, are you are you alone in your enthusiastic pursuit of these studies on your own time amongst your peers, or is there a group of you that are developing this sort of kinship that says, let's continue to push each other in our mutual interests?
Well, so I think my friend group, we all have our own individual areas of study, but
Okay.
that complement each other extremely well because we each have our own subjects which we feel we are the best at. We feel that we are, we want to carry on studying this. So there's one that really enjoys business, one that really enjoys chemistry, maths, so on. So I think
Mm-hmm.
everyone individually has their own subjects that when we're together we can talk about. We say there's this in this subject. They're like, oh yeah, I can see that in this subject. This connects to this and this connects to this and so on.
This isn't really normal for kids like your age to be doing, right?
uh, Maybe not.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant, but I think I've just discovered like this haven of like intellectual minds, which is pretty brilliant. That's awesome. Um, when you look at the world today, Luke, and if you had the opportunity to have the population of the world sitting in front of you, I know this is kind of hard to believe, but 7 billion people who are watching their tubes or their screens, waiting an address from you as to what humanity is desperately in need of right now, what would you say to them?
I think that the main idea is just respect. I think that if one person respects another, they will try their best not to offend them. They will try their best to understand what their point of view is. Because I think what
Mm,
divides the world most currently is the indifference between people, and that people are refusing to understand that. So I think that because there is a large divide in politics
mhm,
in so I think that if people just understood, yeah, you have this political view, that doesn't mean I'll treat you any differently from a person. So I think that people just need to learn to respect each other.
mm. What's a really helpful place for a person to consider what respecting their neighbor looks like?
I think just going out and meeting people like you do yourself and like what I try to do. I think just going out and, maybe if you're in public, just try your best to speak to someone at least, and then try to make as many friends as possible, connections, things like that.
Mhm. What would you say about a person who has some really, really strong perspectives that they hold really tightly in their closed fist, meaning they can't give these up, but they want to get along in community with others who have different perspectives? How would you
I
help
think
them think through, while holding tightly as they wish, to still be able to accommodate with something that is other than their conviction?
Yeah, I think definitely there are those people who are out there, but I think just introducing those ideas that, maybe they're not always, the center of attention in terms of what they what they believe, and that there are people who think differently. And so I think that just introducing those ideas to let them dwell on them and not just have not just have this, like you said, closed fist ideology.
Mm-hmm. I've got a couple like lighter questions to finish, but I saved some really, really hard questions for the end. These hard questions are usually difficult, Luke, for a lot of people because it's hard to reflect on yourself. So the questions are, what would you say are your biggest challenges that you're working through in your own personal life today as you develop as a person? And what are things that you think you do really, really well as a person?
Ooh, so I
And
think
feel free to throw it my way too, because I like this back and forth. But
so. I think the main challenges that face me today is, um, I think that what's holding me back almost is that there's some sort of brick wall of expectation. So I think that,
mm,
you know, I'm expected to do things that maybe I don't think that I can do, and those things that are holding me back, and those sort of challenges, and that I
mhm,
feel like I have to live up to certain expectations.
mhm. And are those expectations self-imposed or externally imposed?
I think 70% would be self-imposed, and then
Mm,
the other 30 would be through family, friends, things like that.
okay. What do you think you're really amazing at? What do you do really well? What are you gifted in?
In terms of, in terms of what? In terms of socially or
It could be socially, it could be ability wise, it could be physical feats, it could be like a really weird knack where you can wiggle your ears.
I
What
think
do you think yourself? What do you think you do really well?
I'm I think I'm best at educating myself. I think in
Mm,
terms of anything such as academics, or in terms
mhm,
of perspectives of other people, in terms of communication, things like that, I think.
mhm. Very cool. Here's what I love about you. And anytime I'm getting to know you, I really enjoy, like, you're a really easy person to talk with. And I think that diversity of your past in different cultural settings is really impacted you in such a way that you are accessible. You're accessible to such a wide range of perspectives. And so I know you and I did an interview a few days ago for your class, and that was fascinating conversation, fascinating. The questions were really well thought out, but there was just that thoughtfulness behind the questions you're asking, which were presented in a very respectful way, in a way that was disarming. And so I think you did that super well as well too. So yeah, kudos there.
Thank you very much.
Favorite color? What's your favorite color?
I'm actually colorblind. Yeah. So, um, but I can see a few colors. So I think that blue is my favorite color because it's one of the only
Okay.
ones I can see. Yeah.
Did not know that. And favorite food.
Oh God, that must be the hardest question. Favorite food? I'd have to say ice cream in
Okay.
terms of desserts because I think it's so, widely catered for. It's, you can have many different flavors, many different anything, just ice cream.
Okay, favorite flavor ice cream then. What would you go for?
I think I have a top three. I
Yeah,
definitely
okay.
cannot choose one. I have chocolate, mint
Yes.
choc chip, and bubblegum.
Ooh, okay. Nicely done. Luke, this has been a fantastic time in conversation with you. I thoroughly enjoyed getting to know a lot more about you. I can't wait till this goes. This is going to air tomorrow, so that's when it's going to be featured. But I can't wait for our audience to get to know you a little bit better. I think they'll be able to now have a picture in their mind when you pop up on the live stream. And thank you so much for making the time to be on the Bincast, where small talk comes to die.
Yes, it was amazing.
Thank you also for the kindness you've shown me and the way that you continue to partner with me in camaraderie, just on a personal basis. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah.
Looking forward to a deepening friendship. But for the time being, we're going to say goodbye on the Bincast. Thanks again for being here, Luke.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Talk to you soon.
Bye bye.
Bye.